Hello, welcome to the Saroy channel. I'm so glad you've joined me this evening. I've got a lovely story here about someone who built a beautiful treehouse. And nowadays there are so many fabulous tree houses out there, and this was a really sensational one. And he got to see a Bigfoot in the hunt. And so I think it's quite an extraordinary story. But before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Love to each and everyone who's listening, and let's get started. Dear Sarah and all your lovely listeners, it was in the fall of 1989 when I had my Bigfoot encounter in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I was 22 at the time and still lived with my parents, who lived in a small house on a few hundred acres of natural forest. As I was getting older, I wanted my own place quite naturally, but also to still live in close proximity to my parents. So I did ask my father if I could build a treehouse further in the forest that I could truly call my own. I had the perfect spot in mind, 3 very strong redwood trees of extensive size in a prime position that overlooked a pretty little creek and acres of lovely grassland, which would mean I would have great views of the natural wildlife. What was there not to like? I also wanted to make the access to the treehouse as discreet as possible, with tiny little steps built into the tree that were not too visible to the naked eye. In other words, I wanted to be living in a home 100 feet off the ground that hopefully nobody knew was there. That way I really would feel that it was my secret spot. My father was not keen about the treehouse idea, especially the part of the discreet access. You would need a proper staircase up and down the tree for your shopping and for anybody who comes to visit you, he said. My mother agreed with my dad, and I would have much preferred a sensible option she would have much preferred a sensible option of my having chosen a cabin or a cottage in the woods, near to theirs. The idea of a relatively inaccessible treehouse did not score many brownie points with her. In a few years' time you'll regret it, she warned me. You're young, you're impractical, full of novel, contrary ideas that will be short-lived once you've got older and a little bit wiser. My father agreed, but finally, after much persuasion, that I could build a treehouse, and my best buddy so happened to be in the treehouse business that was starting to increase in popularity here in North America, and so I had the best man to help me with the job. Like my dad, Casey was not keen about my discreet steps idea to the tree, but he finally relented to my eager pleas and helped me design the perfect treehouse. And once it was finished, it had everything I could have ever dreamed of and so much more. It was the perfect man cave with all the mod cons that I could ever desire. Even my parents thought the treehouse was a true work of art. And when you got to the top and gazed out of the large glass windows, you could see for miles around, and the views were utterly breathtaking. Every morning when I would wake up, I would make a steaming cup of hot coffee and just sit there with my binoculars and observe all the wildlife. I began to see birds that I'd never seen before, and animals that are sometimes so reclusive you never see them in nature. Like I saw a black panther once, and even a mountain lion. I loved the peace and serenity of my new life, and of course the independence it brought me. One morning when I looked out of the window, I saw a herd of deer dashing away from the creek. Something had clearly terrified them, and I wondered what it could be. I felt a sense of growing excitement stirring within me, like you get on a wildlife safari when you see the lion stalking its prey. That was the kind of feeling I had. A feeling of anticipation. I waited for a while and saw nothing, and just when I was about to give up my viewing and make another cup of coffee, my eyes suddenly caught a glimpse of movement coming from the dense-looking shrubbery that I knew was filled with thorn bushes. Surely nothing on God's earth could come through that, I thought. You'd have to have rhino skin to get through those needles. That would tear your skin to shreds, surely, I thought. Yet again I saw movement, and a black hazy blur came barging speedily through the thick undergrowth with brute force. What on earth is that, I wondered. Then I saw it. At first I really did not know what I was looking at, because the thing, whatever it was, looked like a massive blob of black dreadlocks. What the heck is that, I wondered, as the creature stood up on 2 thick legs that supported a huge, massive torso, shoulders and chest. I noticed that the arms were way too long to be human. and the creature possessed hands and definitely not paws. I immediately put on my scope to get a better view of this strange creature, the likes of which I have never seen before. I focused my scope on the creature and could see that I could see a conish head sitting directly on its shoulders, bypassing any obvious need for a neck. The face was human-like, but it wasn't human, and ape-like, but it wasn't ape. It was as if this creature was a blend of the great ape and human DNA. Then it hit me like a tornado of otherworldly revelation. No, surely not, I argued with myself. No, it can't be. It's impossible. Memories came flooding back of a boy I knew at school once, whom I'd made fun of because he told me he had seen a Bigfoot, and I had mocked him incessantly and teased him for his whimsical naivety. Now I was the one with egg all over my face. The creature in my lens was in no uncertain terms a Bigfoot. It could not have been anything else, and it was as if the creature had stepped out of cryptozoology myths and legends into a blatant, clear and vivid reality. Bigfoot was real. I suddenly felt ashamed for the know-it-all mentality I had adopted throughout my school years. Now I began to realize that I probably didn't know much at all about anything. I watched the creature as he moved with such fluidity. As he walked, every stride he took was huge, at least about 5 feet of ours to one of his strides. It really was like watching a top predator moving with incredible grace. I marveled that something this gargantuan could move like this. It was truly mesmerizing to watch. Then suddenly, like a jet plane about to take off, this creature leapt out of my view with an incredible speed, as if he'd revved up his engine and was gaining more momentum on the ground and was about to take off. I could not see the creature anymore, but I knew that he was in a hunt mode and was probably chasing that herd of deer I had seen moments earlier. It seemed like seconds had passed, and the Bigfoot suddenly came back into view, and I suddenly realized he wasn't chasing deer anymore, but was after some wild hog that I know from experience can be exceedingly aggressive. This was a wild goose chase if ever I saw one, and one that was certainly enjoyable. I thought he must have stumbled across hog along the path as he was about to hunt, and he was changing tactic. Like a lion, he pounced on the creature, holding him down with his massive great girth that clearly must have been crushing that hog. I knew the hog must have been screaming, and I was so glad not to be near enough to hear it because I hate that sound. The Bigfoot, using one arm, then tossed this 400-pound hog in the air as if it was a pizza, and allowed it to land on the ground with an almighty crash. I knew that the hog was dead as it lay limp on the ground, and he straddled it over his large shoulders. The Bigfoot walked away into the undergrowth, leaving the way he had just come. It took me a long while to adjust to what I had seen. In fact, for such a long time, I just stood there, just saying nothing. I knew I had to make amends with that school friend of mine that I had relentlessly teased at school for believing in this cryptid creature. So I decided I would phone him, and that's what I did. "Hello," came the voice at the other end of the line. "Bruce speaking. Hey, buddy, it's Dwayne from high school, remember?" "Yeah," he said. "I remember you." I'm phoning to apologize, buddy." "About what?" came the surprised voice. "Remember how I teased you at school about believing in Bigfoot?" "Oh yeah, that." "Well, you're right. He's real." "You've seen him?" I proceeded to tell him what had transpired in the last few minutes, and I could tell by Bruce's animated response that he was still as passionate about Bigfoot as he'd always been. And the biggest irony of all was that he was studying to be a cryptid zoologist of all things. "Do you mind if I come over to your place?" he said eagerly. "I'd like to see where it all happened and take a look to see if there's any evidence." "Of course," I said. "Be my guest." "I'm sure you know a lot more than I do, buddy," I said. I must say I am still in awe of what I've just seen and more curious than ever. "That's what happens to a lot of people," said Bruce. "Once they've seen a Bigfoot, it changes everything, and people just become passionate about the creature. What do you think that it is? I asked. Well, I think people love mystery, for starters, he said. I know I do. And then there is the humanness to the creature. That's fascinating. I think people relate to that humanness. After a long conversation with Bruce, he arrived at my property within the hour, and I could see by the flushed look on his face that he was very excited to retrace the Bigfoot movements that I had seen earlier. We wasted no time in examining the area with the fine tooth comb, and we found the bloody spot where the hog had been flung to the ground. There was blood everywhere. We noticed the ground was too dry and hard for any footprints of the creature, and so that was disappointing. Yet we could detect the rank odour, or the afterglow, so to speak, that hung in the air that is so often associated with a Bigfoot encounter. We walked deeper into the woods, and Bruce told me to listen. I can't hear anything, I said. That's my point. It's usually quiet when Bigfoot is around, said Bruce. All the animals go quiet. Even the birds stop chirping. As we walked into the woods, I had the distinct feeling we were being watched, and I knew that Bruce was feeling it too. It was like a gnawing gut feeling that is so unsettling it brings up on feelings of extreme nausea. I just knew I needed to leave, and that's what we did. We ended up having coffee in my treehouse, and Bruce told me that my treehouse was the most perfect hideaway spot for spotting Bigfoot. All these years later, I still live in my treehouse with my wife, but we have made some adjustments, like putting up a real great staircase that winds its way up the tree and makes it much easier for access. I have to admit, my dad was right there. I did see the Bigfoot creature one more time, but it was so brief. But I keep on watching, I keep on waiting, and I keep on hoping for another encounter with Bigfoot. And well, Bruce, the guy I teased mercilessly at high school, he's now my best friend. Isn't life ironic? And as far as our fascination for the elusive man goes, well, our fascination for the hairy man has most definitely increased. I hope you guys enjoyed my story. That was a fantastic story. Until next time, good night and goodbye.